Good morning, everyone. Good morning out there in TV land, and good morning here, everyone. Those of you early risers that didn't have anything else to do early this morning, glad you're here. Let's take just a moment to center ourselves so that we can give thanks for the presence and power of God in and through and all around us, before us, behind us, above us, below us, and that in that assurance, we are open and receptive to anything that it is ours to learn today. Thank you, Father. Amen. Again, good morning. I'm going to finish what Les started last week briefly and then get on to my 30 pages. We were pleased for the years at Unity to have so many wonderful people that have books and videos and things about some of the teachers that we had. James Dillard Freeman is an author, Unity a poet, and then head of Silent Unity. James Dillard Freeman was never in a traditional ministry. He was hired by the school at Myrtle Fillmore's encouragement prior to him finishing ministerial school. In fact, he had started working there in high school, I believe, and then went into ministry, and she saw such promise in him that she decided that he should work there, and he worked up to become the head of Silent Unity and was that for, I think, 50 years or better. So he was there when we were both there, and I have lots of wonderful memories of James Dillard Freeman. Lowell Fillmore, son of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, we both knew him. He was the president of Unity School for some time and then handed it on to his son, Charles R. Fillmore. But Lowell Fillmore had his desk right where everybody went past it. If you've ever been to Unity Village, there's an entrance in from the inside in the Rose Garden where there are 10 shining statements up above. If you step on behind that room and turn to the right, his desk was right along that hallway where everybody passed by. He was considered one of the most personable people in Unity at that time. Ernest Wilson was minister of Unity on the Plaza, and Unity on the Plaza was the only church that was actually built for Charles and Myrtle Fillmore to minister in, and they were the first ministers at Unity on the Plaza. And it is still quite a work at Unity on the Plaza. Eric Butterworth, one of our favorites, Marcus Bach, author, public speaker, Margaret Kahn, who was a Canadian and you might not know her, but another person that you may or may not have heard because he moved down to Springfield and opened a pain clinic, pain health and rehabilitation clinic, was Norman Shealy. We went to his well-person clinic in La Crosse, Wisconsin at that time. Another favorite of ours was Verl Minto, author, public speaker, teacher, and motivator who traveled the world speaking and motivating people. His financial goal was to live on 10% and to tithe 90% of his income. And he was at 40-60 the last time he was at our church. Another wonderful person who you may or may not have heard of is Peace Pilgrim. She traveled clear across this country numerous times and walked to teach peace. She was killed by a driver on the road just after being at our church in Wisconsin that following week. These saints and the quotes and so on from them are too numerous to mention in this two-part class, but we did put a lot of those quotes on a handout that we gave all the people who attended our 25th wedding anniversary thing and made it a scroll with a ribbon around it. And we looked for one of those this week, couldn't find one. We've moved several times since then, and so my next move is to tell you a little bit about my journey through Unity so far. In the first lesson I shared a few months ago, I told how in 1973 I was going through a divorce, and My best friend, when I told her that we had separated, she says, what are you going to do now? And I said, the first thing I'm going to do is to look for a church home for my daughter and I. And that was part of the problem, that we didn't have a church home, and he didn't like people, didn't trust people. If we went to a church, he was kind of rude to people and stuff like this, and I'd had enough of those kinds of things. I was teaching at UMKC, and I became aware of a couple of classes at Unity Village. I had gone to them, but I did not know anything about the philosophy of unity or the theology of unity. So when Fern asked me, my best friend asked me to go with her, my daughter and I went immediately. And for 2 or 3 years afterwards, her and her daughter and myself and my daughter all attended 2 church services and ate lunch at Unity Village. Had wonderful, they had wonderful food at that time too. It was a big draw. When I was in the singles group at Unity in the fall of 1973, one of the books that we studied, and I don't know if it's here, I didn't look for it on the shelf here, is What Treasure Mapping Can Do for You. We studied that book, and I enjoyed the book and the testimonials of a couple of people, but finally decided if I tried this, which is mapping out what you want for your future, and in particular, if you're single, what you want in your spouse, in your future, I finally decided that if I tried that, I'd probably mess it up. That's confidence, isn't it? But I was convinced enough to make a list of qualities that would have to have, that a man would have to have if I ever gave up my freedom and remarried. And there were about 10 or so qualities, such as honesty, loving, caring, not into football. I didn't want to be a football widow. Motivated and professional, communicative, aware of spirituality, and so on. Now, to be quite honest, I left a few things out. And when I say that, that always tickles people. My mother came to visit, so I stuck the list in a drawer because I didn't want to answer any questions she might have if she saw that list. And then in the late fall of 1973, I decided, okay, 74 is going to be the big year. I decided to create an affirmation after having learned how important affirmations are to spiritual growth and to living one's life. The one I chose, which I had mentioned before in church, was 1974 will be the best year of my life. And I shared that at the singles group. I told everyone I knew. That affirmation became my mantra, and then I began having a series of catastrophes. And with any one of them, it would have been enough to not believe in that affirmation, but I stuck tight, and things began happening at my home and in my life. Tree roots grew through the pipes in my basement. The basement filled up with water for a few inches. The wooden screen door came off. Wooden screen doors get swollen in the damp springtime in Missouri. It blew off in a storm and ended up in a heap in the front yard. My stool lid broke off on one side, and there's no way I would I would ask a man to help with that. Being the proud feminist that I was, the bathtub clogged up and wouldn't drain. Attempting to fix those things with myself, I cracked the neck of the stool where the water ran from the tank down into the stool. That was a bigger disaster. And I got down into the basement, and with a big wrench I could find, I undid the tank, the canister below the bathtub, and all of that cleanser, all of that chemicals came down on me, my head and my eyes and so on. So I really kind of got in a mess, and one of the things I learned through all of this is that it's okay to ask for help. I didn't do that early on, and I was determined that no man was needed to fix my life here. All kinds of drain cleaner spilled down on me, and the wall behind the little bathroom sink began to leak down on the basement floor. I found there was a shortage of bathroom stools at that time and a shortage of most of the stuff that I needed. The fuse box in my house blew up. I was able to plug in my refrigerator with the neighbor next door, but I would have to replace it with a 100-amp fuse box. I had a car accident. I don't recall the particulars of the first accident, but a month later, a lady T-boned me, ran a red light and T-boned me in downtown Kansas City. Then I had to get a new car. So I had a 69 Ford Fairlane, went to a 73 Gran Torino, and after taking my daughter to school the following morning after I picked up my new car, I pulled into my driveway, stopped as I usually did, except the car was about 1.5 feet longer, and it went right through the garage door. So I needed a new garage door. And all of these things happened as they happened each week, and I shared them with the singles group. They would always ask me, do you still say 1974 will be the best year of your life? And my comment was always, absolutely, it's not even half over yet. And I was so filled with that affirmation that I never doubted it a bit. I wore an ankle bandage from the second automobile accident when the lady T-boned me when I met Les in June. And the following week, I was ready to dance when we were seated the same place at the dinner dance, at the AUC dinner dance. Now, all of this stuff had depleted my savings, so I decided to get a summer job. I felt my daughter was old enough, and those catastrophes had just picked away at my savings, and the singles advisors suggested I check at Unity Village for a summer job. So I did, and I was hired by the education department to register CEP students, to run errands and those kinds of things around the village. And when I went into the cafeteria to hunt for Bob Stevens from San Diego Unity Church, that his ministry needed him to call, they had a message for him, an important message for him. I went over to the male advisor, Conrad Stahl, who was in ministerial school at the time, and I asked him if he'd seen Bob. He said he was in the Rose Garden a few minutes ago, but he didn't know where he was then. And he then said, oh, Pat, this is Les. Les, this is Pat. Les was sitting right across the table from him. One day, less than 2 months, we were married. Off to St. Louis in cooperation with the Expansion Ministry to rebuild a ministry. 1 year later, we went to Seattle. I always found things to do and continued to study to be a licensed teacher. Northwest Regional Youth Coordinator was one of my jobs. Advising or coordinating the YOU projects for all of the entire Northwest region, which was Washington, Oregon, Montana, Idaho, British Columbia, Canada, and Alaska. That was a hoot, I'm telling you, to bring 40 kids from Seattle clear to Unity Village for a week for YOU conference was interesting, getting them out of the bushes all week and stuff like that. I wrote Sunday school material for AUC. I was activity director for a nursing home in Wisconsin. I took a job part-time as instructor for University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and I finished my license teaching while in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, Les had accepted the ministry for a church that was building a new facility. Probably shouldn't have been doing it at that time because it was a very small group. They were renting facilities in a Masonic thing for like $400 a month. The first light bill was over $4,000 a month. It was rather ill-fated. There's a long story with that. But we both worked our tails off, literally, for those 5 years to program that building, and by the time we left, it was half paid off. So that applied the principles over and over and over again, too. So when he took a job in Independence, Missouri, I applied to seminary and worked my way through conducting tours, writing press releases for all the events at Unity Village, and did probation counseling for 2 judges in Belton, Missouri. Now, before I went to seminary, I was a licensed teacher for close to 10 years. And I had asked Spirit to show me these principles working in secular settings. And then I went into seminary. And I took advantage of every opportunity that came my way in a secular setting to see these principles work. And let me tell you, you can turn somebody around 180 without the God talk in a secular setting by applying the principles in, without the God talk. And I really enjoyed doing that, because that was what I wanted to see, what I asked Spirit for, and boy, did God come through for me. Melody married the same weekend I graduated from seminary. Les and I went to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania as co-ministers. It was that time I was able to serve as chaplain for Presbyterian University Hospital, for Children's Hospital, and for Ioneer Hospital of Pittsburgh. I resigned from Pittsburgh. We were co-ministers, and I resigned from there after a year because I felt like 2 salaries were too much of a drag on the ministry. Then I took a position in Warren, Ohio. We moved to Ohio. Les served Akron Unity while I served in Massillon. So sometimes we were co-ministers and sometimes we were in 2 separate ministries for all these years. We moved back to the Kansas City area, and after a while, Les accepted leadership in Nebraska. I spent some time at Winfield College as housing director and founded the group in Council Bluffs, Iowa. I realized how tired I was of moving about that time, and I decided, and I told Les, I said, if you're going to continue to do this, you're going to do it alone. I'm going to find a place, put down roots, and stay there. So we were introduced through my daughter to a couple of churches that were yoked together that were independent churches. They were not connected to any denomination. And so Melody saw the ad for a minister for these churches in the newspaper, of all places. How many times do you see in the newspaper an ad for a minister? So she saw that, called us, and we inquired about it and took turns going there to speak and to interview. And by the end of the summer, we had entered into a contract as co-ministers, performing. This was in northern Illinois. The church was in a little town called Lindenwood, Illinois, and Monroe Center, Illinois. They were yoked together, and they were independent churches, had been chartered as that, and were still independent. Their prior minister had been a full-time teacher and a part-time minister for 33 years. And when I saw that and heard that, I thought, that's the stability I'm looking for. So our contract included performing all ministerial tasks and creating our own benefits in retirement through other avenues, because we both wanted dual careers to stabilize, and we liked small ministries and wanted to help. We'd both been raised in small churches and wanted to help out small churches. So we put down roots there and were there for 25 years until we retired. People got the Unity principles without the Unity talk every single Sunday and every class. And it was really fun and interesting to do that. We were there 25 years. My second career was teaching elementary physical education and music. I taught cohorts of graduate students in addition, teachers working toward their master's degree, and I administrated and taught in those programs for St. Xavier University for 10 years. I taught ESL following certification training for the community college in Rockford, 10 years also. It was a joy to work together, and it was a freeing thing for us to be co-ministers in these 2 churches, because I could put on musicals, I could write plays, I could do all sorts of things besides speak on Sunday morning and do the counseling and all that kind of stuff. So it freed my creative side to do all sorts of things. And Les was, and I didn't mention to you that the reason I'm with him is because he lets me be me. I don't know how many of you understand that, but my first husband was not like that at all. He was uptight. He was jealous. He was, didn't like people, didn't trust people, and I'm very gregarious and trust everyone. So that 25 years surpassed the 20 years before it in moving all over the country, in fulfillment and opportunity. It was one of the best times in my life, and we made some wonderful, wonderful friends. At this time in our lives, we have 2 grown grandchildren on my side, 8 on Les's side. I used to joke with him that he fell asleep during the movies in service. The ones that talked about how to regulate your family. Because he has 3 kids and I have 1. We're nearing 50 years of marriage. In August, it'll be 50 years. We have a new, smaller home, 3 fun fur babies that keep us busy all the time and up all times of the night. We are making new friends and having new experiences. For me, it's a garden club and investment club. For Les, it's golf, and both of us enjoy a card group that we meet together with every Friday and have snacks and desserts. Les did work with the census last year, and for that we are paying a big boatload of taxes. He's now become part of the Springfield Cardinals. I have to tell you a little story. I think we told a little bit of that last week, didn't we? When he graduated high school, he was excellent in all sports that they had in the small school he was in. But he went to try out for the St. Louis Cardinals. He did really well in the tryout, but he was a skinny, scrawny kid that wasn't even shaving at almost 19. So they sent him home. They said, you go home and grow for a year and then come back next year. His father said, you're not sitting around here for a year. So he worked briefly for Coca-Cola Company and then went into the Air Force. And in the Air Force, he became a basketball player for the Air Force, and they were flown all over the country to play other teams at other bases. So that was kind of a fun thing for him, I think. But to continue the star thing, he was hired part-time seasonally for the St. Louis, or for the Springfield Cardinals recently. And so he's there in the team store many of the home games. However, last week he received a text, would he be willing to go to St. Louis for the Cubs Cardinals game? Lots of extra people because the 2 teams are close together, so they needed extra help. So they said they would bus him up there, they would put him up in a motel, they would feed them, they would get them out to the ballpark and so on. So he became a part what day was that, Thursday night? Wednesday and Thursday, he became a part of the St. Louis Cardinals organization after 64 years. Now, it doesn't matter that he was cooking fries and brats and putting boxes together. He still was part of the Cardinals organization. Was kind of so don't give up your dreams. They may come in a different form, but don't give them up. So it's an absolute joy for us. I'm also part of the community band here, sponsored by MSU, and I'm loving that a whole lot. It's an absolute joy to attend church together for the first time in our almost 50-year marriage, and to be a congregant here at Unity. So I guess a big question is, will we stay here? That's yet to be determined. We both have long-term, long-life genes from both of our mothers, one 92 and the other 96. And the one that passed away at 96, Les's mother, would have been here at 98 or 100, but somebody made a mistake. They were supposed to monitor her medicine, and they did not. So I do not like being this far from my daughter or grandchildren. They may move closer here, or we may move closer there as we become maybe older.
Yeah, when you get
We have worked dual careers for so long that we need to keep busy and find challenges. But it was 64 years ago when he applied for the thing. I think that's a hoot. I enjoy that. I want to also mention that all of those catastrophes that happened as a result of my affirmation in 1974, they all resulted in something I had either complained about or had wished for. So watch your complaints. The new fuse box allowed me to install air conditioning. The first car accident, the new car that I had was puttied and spot painted. I did not like that, so I complained about it. The second car accident, the parts were fixed correctly with new parts. The screen door became swollen in the humidity and wouldn't close so I could even lock it, and I complained about that. Now there was a new door. I wanted a vanity in the bathroom rather than just a wall-hung sink. Well, that came true. Everything else served to get the house ready to either rent or sell, and then I met Les. Nothing was lost. Absolutely nothing. Even though the affirmation was flawed, it should have said 1974 will be my best year yet, and somebody recognized that the day that I spoke. I don't remember who it was, but somebody recognized that. Nothing was lost. I had a summer job I needed financially, and that is where I met Les. And we've been together almost 50 years. I wanted to share briefly why I hang in there in Unity. Some women have been fighting longer for equality than blacks or LGBT. I have had many, many experiences as a woman being treated like a second-class citizen. Men, you need to listen. You need to pay attention. If you've ever had trouble with a woman, you need to take a lesson here. My great-grandmother was a teacher. My grandmother was a teacher. My mother was a teacher. I was raised in an area where women teachers were paid much less than their male counterparts. And comments that I heard were, those two, meaning the superintendent and his wife, who was the English teacher and one of the best teachers I ever had in high school, they sit at the same table. They don't need two salaries. So they paid her a fraction of what he made as superintendent. ERA has only, and I didn't get this looked up, ERA has only been passed in a few number of states so far. Why? I don't know why. One reason is that so many women, I think, are content to be taken care of. Do not fulfill their potential. Do not put themselves out into the world as much. And I want to tell you why, with Unity, I care so much about. And this is from Unpublished Fillmore. It was published in Unity magazine, September 1935, in an article that Charles Fillmore wrote about the hidden man of the Bible. Now listen carefully. This is what married me so much more, even when I read this. The masculine phase of mind has been allowed to dominate so long that it now assumes that everything must be subservient to it, and that its dominion and dictation is the edict of divine law. The feminine, with its mighty heritage of love, has been mesmerized into this belief and accepts as a matter of course the rule of the head over the heart. This false state of mind has thrown the whole race out of balance. Are you hearing that? And severed the spiritual connecting link between man and God, which is love. So it is written, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Jesus Christ was a balanced combination of wisdom and love, masculine and feminine, and in this he was the incarnation of the image and likeness of creative mind, also the visible manifestation of the hidden man that the whole article is about. And that is why I love Unity so much. But I want to talk a little bit about Connie is the fourth generation and the first woman to become Unity's chief executive, and is, I think, still today, or was until recently, the chief executive. She moved with her husband after she married to Florida, and she does this long distance. Says it works fine. She graduated from Lee Summit in 1966 as valedictorian from Pomona College in Claremont, California in 1970 with honors. Not sure of Unity until she did in-depth research for nuggets, little booklets, and we didn't bring all those booklets. We have a great big library of pamphlets that Unity has printed over the years. 1974, Jim Freeman encouraged her to go to ministerial school, and she did. She married a classmate, John Strickland, returned to Unity in 79, and became prepared for the presidency. Included graduate work in business at Rockhurst College in Kansas City. She had interests like developing a helpline, which I served on when I was in ministerial school. She had a lot of civic responsibilities, and the Red Cross, Commerce Bank, Lowell and May Rowland were spiritual leaders, as well as her great-grandparents. Royal was the youngest. He's listed as unrealized potential. He was deeply involved in Unity, but he died at age 34. He was the most lovable and the most loving of all three sons, most likely to succeed as president. He was got involved with Myrtle at age 10 with We Wisdom. And We Wisdom is a magazine for children, and there are 3 sample copies out there. He also played on the varsity football team. He weighed 100 pounds at age 7, nearly 300 as an adult. They had to order special football equipment for him, but he did play football. Was in World War II as a second lieutenant, but in 1919 returned to Unity. He was a Mason and a Rotarian. He died of liver and heart disease, but he was extremely popular. His memorial service was probably one of the largest ever in the Kansas City area. Huge. Rosemary Fillmore Ray was 4 years younger than her brother, Charles R. The interesting thing about Charles Fillmore was that he studied the classics under the wife of a lieutenant in the Army back near the Indian reservation where he was born. And they named their 3 boys after some of those. Waldo Rickert, Lowell.
Lowell is a middle name. I'm trying to think of the first.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what that name was. I'm not coming up with it yet. But Rosemary Fillmore Ray had her interests also. She went to Christian College in Columbia, studied until 1944, and then studied radio broadcasting at the Pasadena Playhouse. In 1947, she married Stanley Grace, had 2 children, and one of them was back there while I was there taking some classes. But I didn't get to know her all that well. Stanley Rickert Grace and Rosalind Fillmore Grace were their names. In 1956, WHB radio station, if you're old enough, you might remember WHB call letters. And later, Daily Word adapted these 5-minute things for the Unity movement called The Word. And they had all kinds of stars give the word, and it was almost like a Daily Word message in those 5 minutes. And it was Rosemary who did those, who planned those and prepared them, and who instituted those. Rosemary filed a lawsuit, again, which she regretted later, against her brother. The interesting thing was the different ways in which Unity Village was incorporated made it a nonprofit. However, the 50 shares of stock were not, they didn't get dividends at all. They were just held by the family. And she somehow misunderstood all of that and felt like she should have her name on some of those shares. So she and her then husband, Ralph Ray, who was a very loving, caring, good minister and was the first Unity minister that Les ever had at Unity Village, they moved to Florida. And when she came back, she became the Goodwill Ambassador for Unity, retiring in 1998. Rosemary Fillmore Ray now lives in Jamaica, has a warm relationship with her brother, better than ever in the past. We could not find any information on Pete Ray. The only thing we could figure out is that perhaps he was Ralph Ray's son. But I knew him. He was in ministerial school around the same time I was. Rosemary had no children, 2 with Stanley, but none with Ralph Ray. Leaders of the village chapel during our time and since then have been Ralph Ray, Jane and Sig Paulson, Frank and Martha Judici, and the Sunday school was handled by Betty Pilgrim. I don't know if any of you know who Betty Pilgrim is, but she was quite the teacher and director of the Sunday school there for a long, long time. My daughter used to tell me, I'd say, how was Sunday school? She'd say, well, we blessed this and we blessed that and we blessed everything. Betty was big on blessing anything and everything. And so that's what she got out of it, was all kind of blessing. One of the things that also I enjoyed was guest speakers from around the world. Les and I taught CEP classes for licensed people becoming licensed teachers, various courses during the 2 years that I was there. Phil White was head of the Unity magazine for many years. That has changed now. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that the 1,440 acres is a little different now. It was 1,440 when I was doing tours at Unity Village and had to memorize a transcript. But the Latter-day Saints have tried to buy it for many decades. Why? I'm not sure. I think they feel like, from their theology, that it's one of the places that Jesus might touch back into the planet when he returns. That's the only thing I can figure out, because I don't know a lot about the LDS church. But LDS has a headquarters in Independence, Missouri, and they have tried to buy Unity Village for many years, or part of it. Maybe that 200 acres that's missing is owned by them. I don't know. But we had many wonderful, that is our spiritual home. My daughter grew up there basically from age 5 on. She's a strong advocate of principle, and I get tickled at her sometimes when these things come out. Like one time I was taking her to a dancing lesson in Seattle, and I looked down and the gas gauge was on E, and I said, oh, we got to get some gas. The gas tank's empty. She says, Mother, your tank is filled with love and energy. So raise a child in unity and it'll come right back at you. So I think the time's about up, isn't it?
You're good to go for a while.
I'm good to go? Yeah, are there questions about Unity Village or any of the leaders? We have had some wonderful experiences. I'd tell you a little bit about James Dillard Freeman. He was never a minister, but I took a writing, he's the poet laureate for Unity, wrote the poem that went to the moon years ago, and when I took the writing class under him, he said that his commitment was to never go to sleep without writing something, even if it was a paragraph, and he's done that all of his adult life. He also said that when he writes, he never titles anything, because it gives the publisher something to do besides critique the writing. So he has an interesting approach to writing and to life. I'm going to talk more about him because James Dillard Freeman wrote a poem for less, wrote a writing for less, and it's in hand writing years ago that's about this long. So I'm going to mention some of those principles and so on next week when I speak in the service, Sunday service. So Unity magazine has changed sizes. In its history, Good Business was one of the publications of Unity. The people, the leaders in Unity were considered to be very good business people. And during Lowell Fillmore's time as president, it was during the Depression. He kept it in the black the entire time. It was amazing. He was considered a very good businessman. Yes.
Give them some time to ask the question.
Yeah. Any questions? I didn't see any hands, so.
Oh, okay.
You yourself, and I'll open it up.
Yeah, Dee.
I thought it was very funny last week when you told Les that he was rambling, because there's a story about Myrtle reaching out and pulling on Charles's coattails because he was going on a little too long for his life.
So I'm following in good
There you
footsteps, is
go.
what you're saying? Remember that, huh?
So should I pull on your coattails?
Why not?
One time I kicked him under the table, I think. It was just a little touch.
I just wanted to say, Reverend Pat, that we have someone here today that's never heard of Unity till today. So we're testifying already about Unity Village, and so I sent her some materials. So.
And is she online or
Right now.
online?
Her name is Brenda.
Welcome. Welcome, Brenda. You will find a great story in Unity, and you will find a great home in Unity if you choose to continue online or in person here.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
I just wanted to know, did James Dillard Freeman, was he ever married, or was he?
Yes, Jim Freeman was married earlier in his life, but his wife died, and there's a poem that he wrote about that. I don't have those two books with me, do I? There's a poem that he wrote about that. I was going to read you one of my favorite poems, but I don't have. Are there any books in that bag? No. Upon This Flame is the poem that is one of my favorites. And also there's one that he wrote about his dog. And it's titled She Lets Us Love Her. But the poem I Am There, I think, was written essentially to his wife when she died. I believe it was probably of cancer. Then later, a few years later, he married Betty. Wasn't that her name? Billy, that's it. Billy Freeman. And the two of them, between the two of them, they had significant leadership of Unity, of Silent Unity for many, many years. Another thing about him that I think is interesting is that for many, many years, they would put a picture. They received pictures, photographs from all over the world. And each year or each month, somebody picks one of those, the editors pick one of those, and they would put it on his desk, and he'd write a poem about it. I could not find the one he wrote about the time we got married, because it was on hollyhocks, and I can't find that poem. But it was about how things happen. You know, hollyhocks sometimes are wild, especially in Missouri. They come up volunteer. And so it was written about hollyhocks and how unplanned things happen in your life. And that's kind of what was happening to us when we met that summer and got married. But to have a picture show up on your desk and need to write a poem for it, the picture would be on the front of Daily Word and the poem would be on the back of Daily Word for many, many years, every single month. and he was a genius at that. Any other questions?
I was wanting you to speak just a little bit more on the Peace Pilgrim, if you had ever met her, or...
Yes, she spoke at our church, and she presented, she may have done a similar lecture everywhere she went, but she talked about how living in peace was so important, and she herself had chosen this lifestyle where she just simply walked and didn't have anything with her. She simply took advantage of not advantage of, that's the wrong term, but if somebody wanted to invite her to lunch or dinner, she went, or if they wanted to give her a ride, sometimes she went. But she walked everywhere she went for many years.
Her luggage was clothes on her back, and her food was a snack or something very light that she could carry with her. And she walked everywhere, highways, backwood roads, all across the United States more than once. And as Pat mentioned, she was killed by a errant driver on the road from our church to Indiana.
You're kidding, she was killed right after she visited?
Yeah, that following week.
The following week, she was killed.
The interesting thing, too, is that her body of work, writings and so on, and there was at least one book that we had that had her picture on the front and back of it. Her body of work is at her college is it Indiana or Ohio? It's somewhere in the Midwest. There is a body of work that was hers that tells all about her and that shares a lot of her work with her. That's true of a lot of people who pass away. They give the fruits of their labor for many, many years, whether it's science or art or whatever, to the college or university where they had attended. And that is true for her. It's true for Bob Hope, I think. It's true for, who was the clown? Yeah, his body of work is in his college. Kind of interesting. I've been to so many colleges, I wouldn't know where to put everything. Yeah.
Did you ever meet Grandma Gatewood?
Pardon?
Grandma Gatewood, have you ever heard of her?
Grandma,
Gatewood?
Yeah, no.
I haven't.
She's similar to she's in the 50s. I don't know, she was had like 11 kids in Ohio. And her husband used to really do a number on her, and I don't know, her kids were grown, and she read something about the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, I just read the book on her.
She carried like
month
a
or so
sack.
Yeah.
She hiked it like she was like old. She was like in her 50s when
She,
she started. She had a bad leg and stuff. And
She's,
hiked it.
she was abused when she was married,
Yeah.
and she had all these kids, and when she finally divorced them, and she was a walker, so she hiked the Appalachian Trail 3 times, she walked the Pacific Ridge River Trail.
Wow.
She did all sorts of hiking. She was not part of Unity, but she was a very, very spiritual person. She hiked with nothing except a knapsack.
Yeah, she had like a sack that she put over her shoulder.
Yeah.
She took what is it? Those little Vienna sausages.
Yeah. She
And
was,
she picked like wild onions, wild carrots. Well, a lot of people like yeah, she ate dinner at their house. They'd invite her and such.
I have not heard of her.
I've got her book. I'll look
Sounds
it up.
interesting, yeah. That's interesting. And several of the people in Unity are somewhat characters as well. Ed Rabel was an unusual person. One night when it flooded in Lee's Summit, he was in his apartment and woke up with his bed floating on the water.
Wow.
But he was a man that never married. lived by himself all of his life and was extremely spiritual, a great spiritual teacher and a Bible teacher. Super. Frank and Martha Judici. Frank taught a lot of the Bible too at Unity Village when I was there. But we mentioned George Lamsa last week and how he lived in the area where Jesus lived and spoke the same language as Jesus did, was his first language. So he knew the subtleties of the language, and there are there's an idiom thing over here. He did a translation of the Bible because he felt most other translations were flawed, as most of us do. Translating from another language is something I would never attempt, ever, ever, ever. I've taught so many people from all over the world English and have gotten tickled when they try sense of humor or something and talk about different colored horses and all that kind of stuff instead of a horse of a different color. And they'll try their attempt at humor. That is one of the last things that develops when you're learning a language, is the humor, because you have to know the subtleties. And our language is evolving. In English, we're evolving, and most of our common talk today is connected to the culture, pop culture. And if you're not raised here and don't understand the pop culture, then you're lost in English. So I enjoyed my time with people from all over the world, teaching them English, and it's been quite an adventure.
I didn't know that the Fillmores were the first ministers of Unity on the Plaza. And I don't know how long they were the ministers there, but I think I don't know if you are even familiar with the story, but Unity was built, I believe, before the Plaza in Kansas City, and I had heard that the Plaza was actually, the architecture was actually copied from Unity Village.
Mm-hmm.
From Unity on the Plaza.
And it's Rickert Fillmore, who was considered the flashy of the three sons. He liked architecture and went to Italy, got into the Mediterranean design, and he's the one that designed all of the posts that are kind of like this at Unity. Those molds, when I was in ministerial school, were still there in an outbuilding of all the gingerbread there at Unity Village. And it was all made from material taken from Unity Village. And he was the designer. Charles and Myrtle were the inspirers, but he was the designer of all of that and oversaw the construction of the original buildings. The more recent buildings, not so much, but the original buildings all along where the fountains are.
Do you know if the Plaza was copied from that then?
It could have been. The things around the church, I don't know about the rest of the plaza, but the fountains at the plaza are inspired by Italy. So I don't know what kind of connection there might have been, but they're...
There's information in the pre-video on YouTube. One of the pre-videos that I've edited and put into the service talks about that.
I would mention that the original story that includes most of the information about the family, but not the latest information about the family, is the Household of Faith. This was rewritten at least twice. The Story of Unity by James Dillard Freeman is a sort of a condensation, but a reprint almost of this, but it's much smaller, so it's more condensed. The Household of Faith was the original one about the movement. And he pulled out one from our bookshelf this week that was by a totally different author than we had ever heard of, that talks about the Unity movement. And it has much of this information in it. So there are evolutions and changes and reprints taking place all the time. Les, for the 2 years when I was in seminary, he spent a great deal of time in the archives and has a big 3-ring binder full of unpublished Fillmore. And some of those things were published in in a Unity magazine, but not in a book. Some of them may have been now. And that thing that I read you was from a book from Unity magazine, 1935. But We Wisdom, the children's magazine, is the oldest continued children's magazine ever, I think, in the world. And Myrtle Fillmore woke up one morning or one day, all of a sudden she had the thought, who's going to take care of the children? And the answer that came to her from Spirit was, you will take care of the children. And that's when she began the Sunday school and the We Wisdom and got her 10-year-old son involved with that. And he was part of the We Wisdom magazine for many years. And I had a subscription to it when I was a kid growing up. It's an interesting little book and good for kids, very good for kids.
I think it lasted almost 100 years.
Yeah, and it's still, I think it's still going.
No,
Did it close? If you are on the Unity mailing list, about 4 times a year you will get some kind of a letter that will be a themed letter, and you will, if you would like one of these booklets as a spiritual inspiration, they'll send it to you free. This is just 4 of them. They come about 4 times every single year. We had a collection of daily words in Unity magazines that would fill a huge shelf at one point, and in the moves we've made recently, we've had to relieve ourselves of some of those. And now I look back and I'm thinking, maybe we should not have done that, but we have several. And the Good Business magazine had good business tips for business people. The Fillmores early on were very popular and very well known around the entire Kansas City area. Charles was in real estate around Kansas City, and he mapped out Gladstone in North Kansas City, which still exists. It was called Gladstone Heights, a neighborhood in North Kansas City. I have a friend that lives there. And so several of them were very popular and very involved in civic matters in Kansas City for many years. I don't know how well any people are living would ever remember them, or if things have happened that, and the connection with the plaza is an interesting one. But the Plaza Church is the only one, Unity on the Plaza is the only one that was actually built as a church for Charles and Myrtle Fillmore to minister in. Even Unity Village, that was considered Unity Farm and was different and developed in a different way for a different reason. There are tunnels under the original buildings so that the workers could go from building to building and to the cafeteria and all, and not have to be out in ice or snow or inclement weather. It's an interesting place. I know, time. Are we ready? Okay, let's close our eyes for just a moment. There also is a basket back there, and you can give in at least 3 different ways: the Tithely app and something in the basket. PayPal. I don't use those, so I forgot it. So let's close our eyes for just a moment and say, thank you, God, for your presence and your power in the history of Unity and in each and every one of our lives. There is no separation between those saints that have gone before us and ourselves. They cheer us on every moment of every day. For that, we are truly grateful.